My girlfriend used me for 2 years to win back her ex. She drained our $10K account for a Maldives trip with him. But her best friend exposed her with evidence that destroyed her completely. I'm 27 years old. I work in corporate finance. And about a year and a half ago, something happened that basically taught me that people can be way more calculating than you'd ever imagine. I'm telling this now because the truth is, I still have a hard time processing that someone could plan something like this for 2 full years, looking you in the eyes every day while they're using you as a pawn in a game you didn't even know you were playing. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I met Sophia at Marcus's housewarming party, my friend from work. It was a Saturday afternoon, like May 2022, and Marcus had just bought his first apartment, so he organized this casual thing with beer and pizza to celebrate. I didn't really feel like going, to be honest, because it had been a heavy week at the office and I just wanted to crash on the couch and watch Netflix. But Marcus insisted so much that I finally said yes. I got there around 7 in the evening. There were about 20 people there, mostly folks from work or college friends I hadn't seen in a while. I was standing in the kitchen grabbing my second beer when this girl appeared out of nowhere, tripped on something, and spilled her strawberry mojito all over my shoes. They were white Nikes I'd just bought, like $120, and now they were soaked in this sticky pink liquid. She turned super red and started apologizing like crazy. I mean, she really seemed mortified, and I'm not the type to get angry over stuff like that, so I just laughed and told her it was fine. Her name was Sophia. She was 24 at the time, worked in marketing for a tech company, and she was pretty, like really pretty, with this long brown hair and green eyes that looked at you in a way that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We spent the whole night talking. One of those conversations where you start with nonsense and suddenly it's 2 in the morning and you're sharing childhood stories. She told me she'd grown up in a small town about 2 hours from the city, that she'd moved here for college and never went back, that she loved sushi but hated avocado, stuff like that. We exchanged numbers before I left, and honestly, I thought maybe I wouldn't hear from her again. But she texted me the next day, asking if I wanted to get coffee. We started officially dating about a month after that first date, and the first few months were, I don't know how to describe it, like perfect, I dare say. Sophia was sweet, thoughtful, always planning these little surprises like leaving notes in my car or showing up at my office with my favorite lunch. She introduced me to her friends. I introduced her to mine, and everything flowed in a supernatural way. About 3 months into dating, she started telling me about her ex, this guy named Derek. According to her, they'd been together for 2 years before we met, and it was a super toxic relationship. Derek was a tattoo artist, had this whole bad boy vibe, with his full-sleeve tattoos and his motorcycle, and apparently treated her like garbage. She told me stories about how he cheated on her constantly, how he made her feel insecure all the time, how he'd yell at her over minor things, and honestly, it made me angry hearing all that because Sophia seemed like this genuinely good person who didn't deserve that kind of treatment. The thing is, she'd tell me these stories while curled up on my couch, like crying sometimes, and I felt like her protector, like the good guy who finally treated her right after everything she'd been through. In retrospect, I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there, but I was too in love or too blinded to notice them. Sophia mentioned Derek with a strange frequency for someone who supposedly wanted to forget him. Like there was always some new story about something horrible he'd done. And now that I think about it, she never really sounded hurt when she told them. She sounded more like she was reciting a script. About a year into us dating, Sophia suggested we open a joint savings account for a trip to Europe we wanted to take. I was excited about the idea, We imagined ourselves touring Paris, Rome, Barcelona, all those cliché places you see in movies. We opened the account at my bank. We both put in an initial amount. He put in like $3,000 and she put in $1,500. And the plan was that each month we'd deposit a percentage of our salaries there until we had enough for the trip. Over the next 10 months, everything seemed to be going well. I religiously transferred like $600 every month to that account. She supposedly did too, although I never verified her deposits because I trusted her completely, like it didn't even cross my mind to doubt. Things started changing super subtly around February of this year. I mean, a little over a year ago from now. Sophia started acting different. Not in an obvious way, but small changes that didn't seem like a deal at the moment, but that I now understand perfectly. She became more affectionate, almost excessively affectionate, like she'd write me these long messages about how much she loved me and how grateful she was to have met me. She had her phone glued to her all the time, which didn't seem weird because she worked in marketing and was always checking social media, but now she'd flip it face down every time she left it on the table. She asked me a lot about my work, specifically about my schedule and my business trips, which I thought was because she wanted to spend more time with me. Then came that Tuesday in March, March 14th to be exact. And it's a date I have burned into my brain because it was the day my life turned into an episode of some dramatic reality show. I woke up around 7 in the morning. Sophia was there in bed with me because lately she'd been staying at my apartment like 4 nights a week. She got up, gave me a kiss, told me she loved me, and to have a good day at work, and left for her apartment to get ready. Everything completely normal, no sign that anything was wrong. I went to the office, had my morning meetings, had lunch with a colleague, and around 3 in the afternoon, I sent her a message asking what she wanted for dinner that night. No response. I sent her another message an hour later. Nothing. I called her around 6 when I left work. Straight to voicemail. I thought maybe her phone had died or something, so I went to her apartment. I knocked on the door, nothing. I called her best friend Nicole to ask if she knew anything, and Nicole sounded confused. Told me Sophia hadn't told her anything about going anywhere, but that maybe she had some family emergency. I spent that whole night awake, literally unable to sleep, thinking about all the horrible possibilities, like that something had happened to her, that she was in the hospital, that she'd had an accident. The next day I called her work, and they told me Sophia had requested indefinite leave like a week before, and she hadn't told me absolutely anything. She kept acting like everything was normal, planning what we were going to do on the weekend, talking about the trip to Europe. 3 more days passed without knowing anything from her. 3 days where I basically lost my sanity, and then I decided to check our joint account thinking maybe there was some clue there. I logged in online and felt like someone had kicked me in the stomach. The account that should have had like $10,000 at that point had $247. There was a series of large withdrawals over the last 2 weeks, all made by Sophia, obviously because we both had complete access to the account. The biggest withdrawal was $6,500 made literally on Monday, 1 day before she disappeared. I checked the other withdrawals and saw charges from a travel agency, specifically flights and a resort. And when I investigated further, I found that the flights were for 2 people, headed to the Maldives, leaving that same Tuesday, March 14th. I couldn't breathe. I literally felt like my lungs weren't working. The Maldives, the place she always said she wanted to go, the luxury destination she said was her dream to visit someday. I called the airline, pretending I was her worried boyfriend, which technically I still was, at that point I guess. And they confirmed that Sophia had taken that flight. I called the resort, a place that cost like $800 a night, and after a lot of insisting and lying about a family emergency, they confirmed they had a reservation under Sophia's name for 2 weeks, and that she was registered along with a Mr. Derek Walker. Derek. Her ex-Derek. The guy she'd supposedly escaped from. The guy who traumatized her so much she couldn't even hear his name without getting nervous. And now, she was in the Maldives with him, at a luxury resort, using the money I'd been saving for a year for our trip together to Europe. I should have felt sadness or maybe pain. But all I felt was this cold rage, like the kind of fury that makes you see everything clearly without the cloud of emotions. I sat in my living room that Friday night with a beer in my hand, trying to understand what the hell had happened, how I'd been so stupid, how I hadn't seen the signs. Then Nicole called me. Nicole, Sophia's best friend since high school, the one who was always with her in all the Instagram photos, the one who supposedly knew her better than anyone. And what Nicole told me that night was so twisted that it honestly sounds like something from a bad movie. Turns out Sophia had never gotten over Derek, not even a little bit. Our entire relationship from day one had been part of an elaborate plan to make Derek want her back. Sophia's theory, according to Nicole, was that Derek only valued what he couldn't have, so if she got a stable boyfriend, someone with a good job who treated her well, Derek would realize what he'd lost and want to get her back. I was literally just a tool, a prop in her game to get the guy she really wanted. But it gets worse, because Nicole told me that Sophia had used her too. The entire time Sophia and I were together, she'd ask Nicole to spy on Derek, to keep her updated on who he was dating, what he was doing, if he mentioned Sophia. Nicole thought Sophia just wanted to make sure Derek wasn't stalking her or something, because of all the trauma he'd supposedly caused her. So Nicole agreed because she wanted to protect her friend. But about 2 months before Sophia disappeared, Nicole started suspecting something weird was going on because Sophia began asking her more specific things about Derek, like if he seemed single, if he talked about being alone, if he mentioned missing her. Nicole confronted Sophia one night after they'd had a few drinks, and Sophia ended up confessing the whole plan to her. She told her that Derek had finally taken the bait, that they'd been talking in secret for months, that Derek admitted he'd made a mistake letting her go, and that they'd planned this Maldives trip together as a way to start fresh. Sophia asked Nicole not to tell me anything, that she just needed a few weeks to sort everything out, that she was going to leave me a letter explaining, but didn't want to do it face to face because it would be too difficult. Nicole, being the good person she is, told Sophia she was making a horrible mistake and that I deserved to know the truth. But Sophia convinced her to wait, promising she'd tell me herself eventually. But Nicole couldn't stay quiet when I started calling her desperately looking for Sophia, thinking something terrible had happened to her. Nicole felt she had to tell me the truth, and I honestly thank her eternally for that because she saved me from continuing to be an idiot, waiting for Sophia to come back with some believable excuse. After Nicole told me everything, I stayed up all that night thinking about what to do. The rage I felt was like nothing I'd experienced before, like physical, like my blood was literally boiling, but there was also this deep pain of realizing that 2 full years of my life had been basically a lie, that every I love you Sophia told me was false, that every intimate moment we shared, she was probably thinking about Derek. I decided I wasn't going to be the nice guy who sits around crying while she enjoyed her life. I was going to dismantle her systematically. I started Saturday morning, like 9 in the morning, still half zombie from not sleeping. The first thing I did was go to the bank, close the joint account, and withdraw the $247 that were left. Then I reviewed all the subscriptions and services that were in my name, but that we shared. Netflix. I canceled and changed the password. Spotify Premium that I paid for both of us, canceled. My phone's family plan that included her line, I removed it immediately. The car insurance where I'd added hers because it was cheaper as a family plan, canceled. The gym membership I paid for both of us, I reduced it to just my name. Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, HBO Max, all canceled or I removed her profile. But here comes the part I really enjoyed. And I know it sounds vengeful because it totally was. Sophia had several credit cards, and for 2 of them, I was like the account holder because we opened them when we were together, and my credit was better than hers. I called both card companies and closed them immediately. There was also a supplementary card from my own credit card that I'd given her for emergencies, like an American Express, and I obviously canceled that one too. I checked our apartment. Well, my apartment, technically, because the lease was only in my name even though she stayed there half the time, and I packed all her stuff in boxes. It wasn't much. Some clothes, beauty products, a couple of books, her laptop that she left because she only took her tablet on the trip. I took all the boxes to her apartment. Still had the spare key she'd given me, and left them there. I changed all my passwords for everything. Social media, email, banking, everything. I blocked Sophia on my phone, on WhatsApp, on Instagram, on Facebook, on all the platforms where we were connected. I sent her one single email before blocking her, not to explain why I was doing all this because she knew perfectly well why, but simply to inform her that I'd removed my financial contribution from her life and not to try to contact me. Then I blocked that email too. This whole process took me basically the entire weekend, and when I finished Sunday night, I felt exhausted but also strangely satisfied, like at least I was doing something instead of just sitting around suffering. 2 weeks went by, like 6 weeks I think, without knowing anything about Sophia. Nicole kept me somewhat informed, not because I asked her to, but because she felt guilty about having been part of the deception without realizing it. She told me that Sophia had extended her stay at the resort because apparently things with Derek were going so well they didn't want to return to reality yet. What Sophia didn't know, and what I was patiently waiting for, was that her financial situation was about to explode in her face. You see, 2 of those credit cards I canceled, she'd used them to pay for part of the trip. While they were over there in the Maldives spending money like nothing, those card companies were trying to process payments they couldn't complete because the accounts no longer existed. Then something beautiful happened, at least from my perspective. About 67 days after she'd left, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was Sophia, obviously using the resort's Wi-Fi because her phone line no longer worked. The message said something like, "Ryan, please, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. There's a misunderstanding with my card, and the hotel won't let me leave until I pay." I didn't even respond. I just blocked that number too. I received like 10 more messages from different numbers over the next 2 days, each one more desperate than the last, begging me to help her, promising to explain everything, saying she'd made a terrible mistake. I blocked them all. Finally, like a week later, Nicole called me and told me Sophia had returned. Apparently what happened in the Maldives was that when they tried to check out of the resort, Sophia's cards were all declined. The resort told them they had a pending balance of like $15,000 between the extension of the stay and all the extra services they'd used, like spa, excursions, fancy meals at resort restaurants, all charged to the room, assuming the cards would work. The resort held their passports until they paid. It's a policy they have, apparently, and Sophia had no way to get that money because I'd cut off all her access. Derek, according to Nicole, completely panicked and called his parents asking for money. His parents sent him enough to cover his part but refused to pay for Sophia, like they told him that was his problem. So Derek paid his debt, grabbed his passport, and flew back home, leaving Sophia there alone. She ended up having to call her own parents, admit that she'd stolen money from a joint account with her boyfriend to go on vacation with her ex, and beg them to help her get out of the country. Her parents paid the minimum balance so they'd give her passport back, but told her she'd have to pay them back every cent, and the relationship with them was super damaged, obviously because she'd never told them about Derek. She'd always presented our relationship as something serious. Sophia showed up at my apartment like 2 days after getting back to the country, knocked on the door, and when I didn't answer, she stayed there knocking and yelling my name for like half an hour. My neighbors were starting to come out to see what was going on, so I finally opened the door. She looked terrible. And I don't say that to be cruel, she really looked like she hadn't slept in days, with her hair a mess and her eyes red and swollen. She started with this story about how it had all been a mistake, that Derek had manipulated her, that he'd promised her he'd changed but turned out to be the same as always, that she realized I was the man who really loved her, and that she'd been an idiot for risking what we had. I told her to leave. She started crying, like sobbing dramatically, saying please listen to her, that we could go to couples therapy, that she'd do whatever it took to regain my trust. I just stood there looking at her, and the weird thing is, I didn't feel anything, not anger or sadness or satisfaction, just this emptiness where my feelings for her used to be. I told her I knew everything, that Nicole had told me about the whole plan, and her face immediately changed from desperation to panic. She tried to say Nicole was lying, that she'd misinterpreted things, but I just closed the door. She kept knocking and yelling for another 10 minutes, and then finally left. I thought that would be the end, like that Sophia would finally understand we were done and she needed to move on. But like a week later, she started posting on social media, specifically on Facebook and Instagram, where we had several mutual friends. The posts were these vague things, but clearly directed at me, like without mentioning names, but obviously about our situation. They said things like sometimes the person you think loves you really just wants to control you, or I escaped from a relationship where they made me feel worthless. She posted a picture of herself crying with a caption about how she's healing from emotional abuse. That infuriated me because one thing is for her to lie to me and use me, but another completely different thing is for her to try to make me look like the villain when she was the one who orchestrated everything. But I didn't do anything about it because I thought eventually her posts would lose traction and people would forget. What I didn't expect was for Sophia to escalate things. She made a long post, like a complete essay, where she described an abusive relationship without giving names, but with enough details that anyone who knew us would know she was talking about me. She talked about how her ex-partner, meaning me, had isolated her from her friends, had manipulated her financially, and had threatened her when she tried to leave. Several of our mutual friends started sending me messages asking if it was true, and some directly stopped talking to me, assuming I was this horrible person. Marcus, the friend at whose party I met Sophia, called me super angry, asking how I could do that to her. I tried to explain the truth to him, but it sounded so elaborate and crazy that even I doubted if anyone was going to believe me. I was about to lose my mind when Nicole did something incredible. Nicole, who had been Sophia's best friend for literally 11 years, posted a response on Facebook, tagging Sophia directly. Nicole's post basically dismantled Sophia's entire narrative, but she did it in the most brutal way possible, with proof. Nicole shared screenshots of conversations with Sophia, where Sophia literally described her plan to use a stable boyfriend to make Derek want her back, where she talked about taking money from the joint account without telling me, where she laughed, saying I was too trusting and would never suspect anything. The screenshots were there, with the dates and everything, impossible to deny. Nicole wrote this long message explaining that she'd kept quiet because she valued her friendship with Sophia, but that she could no longer stay silent, watching her try to destroy my reputation when she was the one who'd done everything. The reaction was immediate and brutal. People started sharing Nicole's post, commenting on Sophia's posts, calling her a liar and manipulator. Sophia deleted all her posts and made her account private, but the damage was already done because people had taken screenshots of everything. 2 days later, Nicole told me Sophia had lost her job. Apparently, someone from her office had seen all the drama on social media and reported it to Human Resources. And since Sophia had lied about her reasons for taking indefinite leave, she said it was a family emergency when she was really going on vacation with her ex. The company decided to terminate her contract. But the story still doesn't end there, because the universe apparently had more on the menu for Sophia. Derek, who, according to Nicole, had returned from the Maldives promising Sophia they were finally ready to be together seriously, started dating Sophia's younger sister about a month after all this. Her younger sister, who was 21 and had always admired Sophia. Nicole told me Sophia had a complete breakdown when she found out, like really lost it, screaming and crying and saying everyone had betrayed her. Her parents, who were still angry about all the money they had to spend to get her out of the Maldives, basically told her to get it together and find a new job because they weren't going to keep supporting her. About 6 months passed after all this. 6 months, where I honestly started rebuilding my life. I got a promotion at work. I moved to a new apartment in a better area of the city. I started dating someone new, a girl named Lauren, who I met at the gym and who's basically the opposite of Sophia in every way. Like honest, straightforward, no drama. Things were good, really good, and I'd almost stopped thinking about the whole situation with Sophia when she showed up again. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was arriving at my new apartment with Lauren after going to the grocery store, and Sophia was waiting outside the building. She looked different. Not necessarily worse, but definitely tired, like these months had weighed on her. When she saw me with Lauren, her face did this weird thing where she tried to smile but ended up looking more like a grimace. She asked if we could talk in private, and I told her no, that anything she had to say, she could say right there. Lauren went inside the building to give us privacy, even though I told her it wasn't necessary, but she's considerate like that. Sophia started with how she needed money, that she had a credit card debt of like $18,000 from the Maldives trip plus interest, that she couldn't find work because her reputation in the industry was ruined, that her parents weren't talking to her, that Derek was with her sister, and she had no one else to turn to. She asked me, literally begged me, to lend her money or at least help her get a job or something. I told her no, simple and direct. She started crying, saying I was cruel, that how could I leave her like this when we'd shared 2 years together, that she'd made mistakes but didn't deserve to be financially destroyed. I told her maybe she should have thought about the consequences before stealing almost $10,000 from a shared account to go on a luxury vacation with her ex. I told her that actions have consequences and that she was living the consequences of her decisions and that I had absolutely no obligation to rescue her from the situation she herself created. She left crying, and I guess that was the last time I saw her, because she hasn't tried to contact me since then. Now I'm here, 27 years old, in a new and healthy relationship with Lauren, where I don't have to worry about secret plans or elaborate manipulations, where when she says, "I love you," she really means it. I still talk to Nicole from time to time. We became good friends after all this, and she keeps me vaguely informed about Sophia without me asking. According to the last update, Sophia finally got a job in customer service that pays like half of what she used to make. She's living with a roommate because she can't afford rent alone. And she's in therapy, trying to process everything. Derek and her sister apparently got engaged recently, which Nicole says sent Sophia back to therapy for another 3 weeks. Sometimes I wonder if I should have been more compassionate, if cutting off all her financial doors was too far. But then I remember she spent 2 years looking me in the eyes every day while planning to use me to get another guy. 2 years of my life where every kiss was fake, every I love you was an act, every future plan was a lie. And honestly, I think she got off easy considering it could have been much worse. At least I learned the lesson early. Like, imagine if I'd married her or if we'd had kids. It would have been a nightmare multiplied by 1,000. So yeah, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. And every time I see Lauren smiling at me without ulterior motives, I realize I dodged a bullet. Or rather, I dodged a nuclear missile.